imagine spending £15 billion of taxpayers' money on a plan that 4 out of 5 households won't benefit from, while simultaneously driving up everyone's energy bills. Sounds like a terrible idea, right? Like something you'd come up with after a particularly heavy night at the pub and immediately regret in the morning? Well, congratulations, because that's exactly what Ed Miliband's just unveiled as his grand solution to Britain's energy crisis. It's called the Warm Homes Plan, and if the Conservatives are right, it's less of a plan to warm your home and more of a plan to empty your wallet while making you feel vaguely guilty about not having solar panels yet. Welcome to UK Political Insight, where we break down the policies that sound great in press releases but fall apart the moment you ask, okay, but who's actually paying for this? Let's dive into why Miliband's £15 billion net zero fever dream has the Tories absolutely fuming, and why your energy bills might be about to get a whole lot more interesting. Right, so the headline number is £15 billion. That's the price tag for Ed Miliband's grand vision of warming British homes with green technology. $15 billion. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the GDP of Iceland. We're spending an entire country's worth of economic output on insulation, heat pumps, and solar panels. Now, before you switch off thinking this is just another boring policy announcement, stick with me because the details of this plan are absolutely wild, and the political fight it's kicked off is even wilder. The basic pitch is this. Low-income households and fuel-poor families will get free upgrades, insulation, clean tech, the works, backed by £5 billion of public money. Meanwhile, other homeowners will be able to access low and zero-interest loans to install solar panels, batteries, and heat pumps. There's also a £7,500 grant available if you want to replace your boiler with a heat pump. The government reckons this will upgrade up to 5 million homes, save families hundreds of pounds on energy bills, and lift 1 million households out of fuel poverty by 2030. On paper, it sounds brilliant. Free stuff for people who need it, cheap loans for everyone else, energy bills down, fuel poverty slashed. What's not to love? Well, quite a lot, according to Shadow Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho, who's come out swinging with one of the most brutal takedowns of a government policy you'll hear all year. She's pointed out that 4 in 5 households will receive absolutely no benefit from this plan. Let that sink in. 80% of households get nothing. But, and here's the kicker, they will suffer from higher taxes and higher electricity bills thanks to what she calls Ed Miliband's political choices. That's not just a criticism, that's an evisceration. She's essentially saying the vast majority of people will pay for this scheme without seeing any benefit whatsoever. The fundamental problem, according to Coutinho, is that Britain's in an electricity price crisis, and it's a crisis that Ed Miliband is making worse, not better. Her argument is simple. Labour's obsessing over net zero targets and green technology while ignoring the immediate problem that electricity costs are crippling ordinary families. She's saying unless the government gets serious about cutting electricity bills right now, all these taxpayer-funded schemes are going to saddle households with high ongoing running costs every single year. Because here's the thing about heat pumps and electric heating. They run on electricity, which in Britain is expensive, really expensive. So you might get a free or subsidized heat pump, but then you're paying through the nose to actually run it. This is where the Conservatives' attack line gets really interesting. They're proposing what they call a cheap power plan that would cut everyone's electricity bill by 20%. Now, we can debate whether that's realistic or just political fantasy, but the contrast is stark. Labour's offering expensive green tech that most people won't get and that'll cost more to run. The Conservatives are saying, forget the fancy heat pumps, just make electricity cheaper for everyone. It's a classic political divide. Labour's long-term, environmentally focused, willing to impose costs now for benefits later. Conservatives are short-term, economically focused, promising immediate relief. Which approach you prefer probably depends on your politics, but there's no denying the Conservative message is simpler and more immediately appealing. Let's talk about what's actually in this plan, because it's not all bad, and it's worth understanding the details before we completely tear it apart or defend it. Low-income households getting free insulation and energy efficiency improvements is genuinely good. Fuel poverty is a real problem. People are dying because they can't afford to heat their homes. If this plan actually delivers for those people, that's a massive win. The question is whether it will deliver, whether the £5 billion will be enough, whether the targeting will be accurate, and whether the upgrades will actually reduce bills enough to make a difference. The zero and low interest loans for solar panels are interesting. Solar's gotten much cheaper in recent years, and if you've got a suitable roof and can afford the upfront costs, even with a loan, it can genuinely reduce your energy bills over time. The problem is that over time bit. You're still borrowing money, you're still taking on debt, and you're betting that energy prices stay high enough that the savings outweigh the cost. For some people, that'll work out great. For others, it'll be another financial burden they didn't need. The £7,500 grant for heat pumps sounds generous, until you realize that heat pumps cost somewhere between £8,000 and £15,000 to install properly. So even with the grant, you're still looking at a significant chunk of money. And then there's the running costs. Heat pumps are efficient in terms of energy use, but if electricity costs 2 or 3 times as much as gas per unit of energy, your bills might not actually go down much, if at all. This is the core of the conservatives' criticism. You're being pushed towards electric heating at exactly the moment when electricity is prohibitively expensive. Miliband's plan includes something called the Future Home Standard, which will make solar panels standard on new homes. That's actually quite forward-thinking. If every new house comes with solar, that gradually builds up a stock of homes with lower energy costs. The problem is it only affects new builds, which is a tiny fraction of the housing stock. The overwhelming majority of people live in existing homes, and this doesn't do much for them unless they can afford loans or qualify for the free upgrades. There's also going to be a new Warm Homes Agency, which sounds very bureaucratic and expensive. Another quango, another agency, more administrators, more overhead. The announcement says local mayors will be in the driving seat for rolling out improvement programs, which is code for we're devolving responsibility, so if it goes wrong, we can blame local government. It's classic central government behavior. Take credit for the announcement, shift blame for the implementation. The aim to ensure at least 70% of heat pumps installed in the UK are built here is protectionist industrial policy dressed up as environmental policy. There's nothing inherently wrong with wanting domestic manufacturing, but it usually means higher costs because you're not getting the cheapest option from wherever in the world makes them most efficiently. So again, costs go up, and those costs get passed on to consumers one way or another. Prime Minister Keir gave us the obligatory soundbite. A warm home shouldn't be a privilege, it should be a basic guarantee for every family in Britain. Lovely sentiment, completely meaningless in practice. Of course, a warm home shouldn't be a privilege. Nobody disagrees with that. The question is how you achieve it and who pays for it. Starmer's soundbite dodges both questions while sounding compassionate. It's politician speak at its finest. Simon Francis from the End Fuel Poverty Coalition gave the plan cautious praise, calling it a rescue mission for the coldest, dampest homes in Britain. If the plan actually focuses on the worst housing and the poorest households, that's genuinely worthwhile. But Francis also called for further reforms to bring down the cost of electricity, which is basically admitting that the plan doesn't solve the fundamental problem. You can insulate homes and install heat pumps all you like, but if electricity remains extortionately expensive, people will still struggle to heat their homes. Francis also demanded what he calls a warm homes guarantee, with quality advice, consumer protections, and a promise that every upgraded home will see bills come down. That last bit is crucial because it's not currently guaranteed. You could get all these upgrades and still see your bills stay the same or even go up if you're switching from cheap gas heating to expensive electric heating. Without that guarantee, you're asking people to take a leap of faith, and given how much trust in government is currently circulating, that's a big ask. The political battle lines here are absolutely clear. Labor's pitch is that we need to invest in green technology now to hit net zero targets, create green jobs, reduce fuel poverty, and transition away from fossil fuels. It's long-term thinking, it's environmentally conscious, and it positions Labor as the party of the future. The Conservatives' pitch is that Labor's obsessed with expensive green ideology while ordinary people are struggling with bills right now. They're positioning themselves as the party that cares about your wallet today, not about environmental targets in 2050. Both sides have a point, which makes this a genuinely interesting debate rather than one side being obviously right. Climate change is real, we do need to transition to cleaner energy, and insulating homes is actually one of the most cost-effective ways to reduce emissions. The problem is that if you make that transition so expensive that ordinary people can't afford to heat their homes in the meantime, you failed spectacularly. The question is whether Miliband's plan strikes the right balance, and based on the conservative criticism, it really doesn't. The 4 in 5 households receive absolutely no benefit line is devastating because it's probably true. Most homeowners won't qualify for free upgrades because they're not low income. Most won't take out loans for solar panels or heat pumps because they can't afford the debt or don't think the payback period makes sense. So you're left paying higher taxes to fund the scheme and higher bills because energy policy's driving up electricity costs and they get nothing in return. That's politically toxic. Miliband's net zero drive is genuine. He absolutely believes in this stuff, which is both admirable and terrifying depending on your perspective. Admirable because he's willing to push for what he thinks is right, even when it's unpopular. Terrifying because true believers sometimes don't notice when their policies are hurting the people